Hey everyone, it's Andrew Nagel of Alkanine Designs, and we are back for the final part, part 9 of this start to finish pendant design. This one has been a long one. So what we're going to be doing in this video is the final detailing that is going to compose of 30 gauge wire, dead soft, and then a 21 gauge half hard square wire, both sterling silver wires. Now what we're going to be doing is some swirl spiral weave detailing on both of the points where you see the rectangular wires swirl in. And we're going to start with 2 lengths of the square wire to start this off. We're going to be feeding both lengths of wire through to the back. And sometimes, these wires will kind of fight you a little bit, and so it'll be good to, grab some pliers that you can use to grip onto those wires and kind of guide them in there. Going to send this straight through to the back. And attach it to one of our other detailing wires. I don't prefer to do this. I've ran out of space on this frame. That sometimes happens with my pieces, not gonna lie. But we make do with what we can. Once you've attached your wire to the back, you're ready to start forming your first swirl. I always say this, but a natural swirl looks better than a forced swirl. I'm going to kind of angle that in a bit more, but I try to curve my wires as naturally as possible. I just feel it looks better than, a bunch of crimped points on a wire that you've used to make a curve. Kind of readjusting that and putting it where I want it to go. I like to form my spiral detailing support wires before I start laying down the 30 gauge. So now we're going to feed our second wire through, attach that, and form that into the inner spiral. I absolutely love these nylon covered pliers because they allow me to bend and maneuver my wires without leaving more tool marks. So again, we're forming that inner wire now that we've attached the inner base wire to this to the back frame, and now we're forming it to form the spiral weave detailing. I don't want to close it in too tight because I want to leave enough space, in that inner spiral, so that way I can still weave the wire between the 2 points. And again, I like to form the whole wire into the entire shape before I start laying down my 30 gauge wire. 30 gauge is kind of just my go-to for weaving. They do make a 31 gauge in silver. I've played around with it a little bit. It just breaks a bit too often for myself. Once you've shaped your 2 support wires for the spiral weave, you're ready to attach your 30 gauge. I've attached my 30 gauge to the outermost wire. I've wrapped it around 4 separate times, and then I'm pushing it into the tightest point between the 2 wires to secure it in there. The other thing you can do is feed your wire through to the back and secure it to the frame. I've found that once you've secured that, last bit of that 30 gauge, you can kind of pinch it between these 2 weave support wires where they come together, and then it's in there and it's nice and stable. But you've got to force it kind of back in there. And so now we're going to do a cross progressing pattern. And what I mean by that is, since the outermost support wire has more surface area to cover in the entire spiral, we're going to be covering more of it with the 30 gauge than we will be covering the innermost wire with the 30 gauge. And so when we go one time around the innermost spiral, we're going to go twice around the outermost, and then up to 3 on the outermost, up to 4, up to 5, while still remaining on only 1 time around on the innermost spiral support. And you're just going to kind of progress. Your first weave is going to be 1 and then 2 on the outside. Your next weave will be 1 and then 3 on the outside, 1 on the inside, 4 on the outside, 1 on the inside, 5 on the outside, 1 on the inside, 6 on the outside, and then now I believe I'm doing like 7 on this one. I believe I went all the way up to 9 on this weave pattern, but the point is that since you have more surface area to cover on the outermost wire, you have to wrap your 30 gauge around it a couple more times, cover that surface area, and then go back into the innermost detailing wire. So that way it creates that kind of fanned weave effect. We're getting close to the end of this detailing here. I had thought I was going to go back in one more time, but then as I was looking at it, it just looked to be a bit clunky there, and so I decided that that was a good point to stop. So bringing that around, we're going to then cut off the length of our 30 gauge while still leaving, maybe about 10 inches or so on the length, so that way we can connect it to the other spiral weave detail. Then now we're going to bend this wire to the back and find a nice spot on the frame to secure it to. Once we shape it up a bit more. I noticed a nice little cross section on the support that I felt worked very well for the attachment spot. And I'm going to tuck in the end there into the back. As you can see, my tip kind of coming out there, then we're going to secure it the rest of the way. And make sure that we form it up nice. Now, we're ready to make our final detailing on the other side. We're going to be copying the exact same spiral weave process. Using the same technique of attaching the two 21 gauge square support wires for the spiral and then doing the progressing weave pattern, you're going to construct the other side of the spiral weave detail. Now what we're going to do with the innermost wires after we've connected our outermost wires is we're going to connect them together using another weave technique. Unlike the spiral weave, you're going to want to do the same amount of surface area coverage on each side of these support wires. And so what I mean by that is you're going to, well, at least for my piece, I did once around one side and once around the other side, and then did a cross X weave between the two support wires, and then wrapped that 30 gauge that was on each support wire, once around it again, and then crossed it over, continuing that weave pattern until it fanned open at the top. And where it fanned open at the top, when I wanted it to fan open a bit more, I would then do progressions of 2 on each side, and then a progression of 3 on each side, until it covered enough surface area that I felt, it looked aesthetically pleasing for myself. And then I finished the 30 gauge down those support wires and brought those support wires to our sort of horseshoe that we attached our dangle bail to. I've brought those wires down and attached them down there, bringing those tips down on the top on both sides so that way I can polish them down and make them look nice and even. Our dangle bail still functions there. And now we're ready to go ahead and polish this piece up. A couple of you who have been here for a while have probably seen the polishing process before, but yeah, we're going to go through it again for everyone. It's kind of the same thing, so if you've seen the polishing before and you're familiar with it, you can skip the rest of it, but if you haven't seen it before, this is great information. Starting off, I use an extremely rough grit. I believe it's just called the Rough pumice wheel. I'll link these all in the description for you. I then progress onto the 80 grit silicone bristle disc from 3M. I'm going to link these all in the description. These higher grits you don't want to use on 30 gauge wire. They will tear it apart if you try and polish those for too long with this. So keep the 80 grit for your harder tool marks that you need to remove. Then I move on to the 400 grit blue wheel. Same with this one. I mean, you can use it on some of the 30 gauge wire, but don't do it for very long. It will destroy it. It will break it up and your coils will be ruined. I've done that before. Then I move on to the pumice bristle disc. This one I do use on the front detailing, so the 30 gauge, the coiling. Do not use it on stones. It will mess up your stones. After that, I progress to the silicone pads. I use the 1 micron, the light green silicone pad, to keep removing some tool marks, but then to start get, the kind of the final finish that we're looking for onto it. And so we're gonna just keep polishing up some of those harder to reach areas on the back. But I do use these kind of wheel pads on the stones, including this. I believe this one is the fine grade. These ones are okay on like your half round that you've used to secure your stones in because they won't scratch the stones. They're very awesome for polishing, in my opinion. I use them all the time. And then after that, I move on to the ultra fine. This one is fantastic for getting a great, nice finish. That's just like a super ultra mirror finish. The other option you can do after this is to go to the Rouge compound. I'm not going to do that with this piece just because I'm going to be oxidizing it after. And so I figured I might as well just get the kind of like the good ultra finish that I get from the ultrafine pad. And then the final thing I do is I run over it again with the 1 micron 3M disc. Just because that seems to help remove any of the dust, and it gives it one nice final kind of even finish, whereas those pads kind of leave kind of a weird finish to everything. You've got to go over it with like one more thing to get a nice smooth even mirror finish. Then now we're going to oxidize this piece. Again, some of you might be familiar with this part, and if you are, you can stop watching, but if you aren't, it's good information. I always use the Midas liver of sulfur gel mixture. This is very simple stuff. You just mix it with water. And so what we're going to do, since we've got our water already boiling here, I used to do this in a metal container. I just do this in a glass jar now. I just put in some of my solution, put in your boiling water, and then you can dip your piece in. Again, depending on the stone, you might not want to do like super hot water. I've done malachite before and it ruins the finish on the stone, so you kind of want to do a low and slow one there, and I'll do a tutorial on that at some point. But for these stones, we just did super hot, very boiling hot water, and it gives you a nice ultra matte finish very quickly. But what we're going to do is we're going to remove the top layer of that matte finish. Right now I'm using a 3 micron. That is not available anymore on Rio Grande, but what I can recommend to you is use the 6 micron peach wheel from the kit that I'm going to leave in the description, and that will give you the same effect of removing this top layer. The 1 micron will as well, but it's going to take, a bit longer to do that. Do not use the 6 micron wheel on the stones, much as I'm not using the 3 micron over the stones as you see in this video. I just use it to remove the darker spots, and then I can use either the 1 micron over the stones, or I also use some of the sunshine cloths, either the yellow or the blue on the stones as well. I prefer to use the cloths or, something less than the 6 micron or even the 3 micron on the stones, because those will mess up stones. But the sunshine cloths are great for polishing up those kind of, sensitive areas that you don't want to scratch up, being your stones. So the final thing I do is go over it again with the 1 micron wheel. And that gives me the final polish that I'm looking for, the nice shine that you see in most of my pieces. As you can see here, it's all polished up and ready to rock and roll. again, this has been quite an adventure. I didn't think this was going to be a 9-part mini-series, but I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any other questions or you want to see any other part of this kind of explained a bit better, please let me know in the description or in the comments, and I will do that for you. I hope you have an amazing weekend. Thank you all again for the support here, and yeah, have a great time creating, everyone.